Hi there. Welcome to Psych 5310, Ethical and Professional Issues in Psychology and Counseling with Houston Baptist University. This is Module 3. We will cover Chapter 5, and while it's only one chapter, there is a lot of information in this chapter, so let's get a move on. Chapter 5 introduces informed consent, which is the right of your clients to be informed about their therapy. This enables them to make autonomous decisions regarding their therapy. In informed consent, you will be disclosing the risks, the benefits, and possible alternatives to the treatment that you're proposing. And informed consent is something that you must address as soon as it's clinically appropriate. So some of the legal considerations. Does the client understand what they're getting into? We have to be careful to use terminology that is understandable to people who are not familiar with the field of counseling. Is the client competent to give consent to treatment? You have to consider minors, you have to consider people with lower intelligence, intellectual disabilities, and so on. So you have to think, are they actually competent to give their consent to treatment? We'll also want to know if the client is doing so, is consenting voluntarily, or if this is something that they're under somewhat of duress to agree to. All of our clients also need to understand the limits of confidentiality. If once you label them with a diagnosis, then what happens after that? The client needs to know. The client needs to know that you report to the insurance company if you do. You need to know if you're in a school system, what happens with the notes that you are taking while you're working with a student, and so on. So all of these things need to be considered in your informed consent. Also, how will you terminate? Will it be based upon, well, insurance isn't paying for it anymore, therefore we will now terminate? Or will you actually keep going until the client's goals are reached? Here are some of the contents of informed consent. A description of the therapeutic process and the assessments that you'll be doing. Information about you as a therapist. What's your background? What's your training? What's your theoretical orientation? What are the costs that are involved with working with you as a client? What's the length of therapy that you're expecting? And how do you terminate when you plan on terminating? Consultation. Are you an intern and you need to consult with a supervisor weekly? Will their case be discussed with anyone else outside of your sessions? What about if you go on a vacation or if you get sick? What will happen then? Clients need and have a right to know what happens. There are always benefits and risks. Counseling is not always easy for the counselee. Experience quite a bit of distress and disruption within their personal lives as they try to conquer some of the struggles that they've been having. So they need to understand that there are some risks and what benefits they can actually expect. They also need to know if there are any alternatives to therapy with you. Will you be recording sessions? If so, they need to know about this. They also need to know that they have the right to access the files and your notes and so on. And then who else might actually have the right to access those files. And they need to know that you will disclose the diagnosis if it's placed in the client's record. And of course, confidentiality is huge. What point is the limit of confidentiality? What point do you have to, are you mandated to report what you found to others? And the next section of the book covers record keeping. This is also very important guidelines here. How long do you keep the records? Where is it safe to keep them? You want to make sure that the records are not easily seen by someone else. So there are rules, laws, expectations regarding where to keep them, how long to keep them, what form to keep them, and so on. So look over these. With violent or aggressive clients, if you ever use restraint, this must be documented. If you've been working in the school system, then you're already aware of this, but anytime a client is restrained, It has to be documented. You can also never alter the case notes after they have been entered. Not go back and change things for your convenience or to cover up things and so on. If you're planning to work as a school psychologist or a school counselor, you need to make sure that you're informed regarding all of the ethics codes that are appropriate to schools and working with underage children. You need to know about mandates for the creation, storage, and retention, how long you have to keep the records. There are guidelines for you. There are rules, and you need to follow these so you don't lose your license. Other topics that are covered in this chapter include online counseling and what are the ethical issues that are involved with online counseling. About working with minors. If you work with a minor, what changes? Do they have to be a part of the informed consent, or is it just the parents need to consent? We also need to consider, sometimes we see unethical behavior on the part of our colleagues. What's your responsibility as a professional? And of course, the ever important malpractice, liability, and how to protect yourself from the potential of a lawsuit. Now, these topics are far from comprehensive. Make sure you've read the chapter very carefully. I will see you next week in Module 4. Thank you. Bye-bye.